Then at the same time, here's the thing you need to understand about the way our brains work. There's nothing more than the brain loves than to take shortcuts when it's possible. And we actually, if we can get away with it, the human brain says, let's just go with tolerance today with some people. Why? Because tolerance is a total passive way of behaving around other people. There's no behavior associated with it. It's just like, you're there, I'm here, let's just not get in each other's hair, just do our thing, right? So tolerance is really, really easy because it doesn't really take a lot of energy or effort. At the same time, if I look around this room, this auditorium this morning, I look at the amount of diversity here in front of me by age, by gender, by ethnicity, by lifestyle, by how you dress. And this is a microcosm of what we have across the United States. We have the greatest level of diversity in the workforce that we've ever had. And what happens is this: when I'm working with someone who is different than me, the greater those differences, the harder my brain has to work to make sense of those differences so that we can work with each other. How many of you have found that? How many of you have found that the more different somebody is, your brain has to just stretch a little bit harder to kind of understand them and them to understand you, right? In fact, how many of you have coworkers with extremely thick instruction manuals that you still haven't figured out quite how to work with, right? It's not easy. It's not easy with some people. Well, here's where we're going to take a little step back into anthropology. Okay, so I want you to imagine our prehistoric ancestors, hunters and primitive hunters and gatherers, and they're out one day looking for food, and they spot another tribe, a group of people on their territory. What was their first instinct? Kill. You mean they didn't say, hey, come on over, good to see you guys, we're the Smiths. Let me show you, come on up, we'll show you where the good berries and stuff are. Didn't they do that? Why didn't they do that? Because they didn't feel safe, fear, and because they were in a land of very limited resources, right? And so for them, this was a direct threat to our survival. Well, believe it or not, hundreds of thousands of years later, our brains still look at difference that way. So what happens is this: whenever we are around people, especially if we've not met them before, our first instinct is in fact suspicious around people who are, quote, different than we are. Now, suspicion is a mindset, and a mindset leads to a behavior. So what do you think instinctively, if I'm suspicious about people, even if it's just at a subconscious level, what is my behavior that naturally flows from that kind of a mindset? If I'm suspicious, what do I tend to do? Yeah, I tend to be, I avoid, I put space between me. Now, in the professional workplace, does avoiding people take energy? See, we're actually getting away from tolerance and we're spending energy now. Does it take energy to avoid people? Yes. Does it take creativity some days? How many of you have ever gotten to the parking lot at the same time that person did, and you're like, I am not walking in with them. So let's engage our prefrontal cortex. And so what do? We take out our iPhone and we think, okay, let me pretend like I'm texting somebody. Meanwhile, I'm watching that according to my head. How many of you have actually done that? Honestly, come on. Exactly. So not only does it take energy, it takes creativity. Now, let's flip it around. How many of you have ever been on the other end where you felt that you were being avoided by a person or groups of people? Does that take energy? Yeah, absolutely. Do you know that the sense of exclusion or being left out, that's processed in the same regions of the brain that physical pain is? So that takes a lot of energy also. Well, what do you think would take